This is Alex with Orange Eyes, and this is our Weird Tales Shadow Dark Game Jam submission. Eternal Fate in the Penthouse, which you can get by going to the link in the description below. And also, there's a link down there to vote for when voting opens, but we'll talk more about that later. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. You can already see some difference between what I've held up versus the digital file here, and that's because my intention is to have a one-page, quote-unquote, printout for table use, where the digital file here has more information like a cover page. Heads up, this adventure is rated M for mature, but it's about as mature as you want to make it related to charming and drug use, illicit content, partying, and so on and so forth. And it's in CinemaScope because I've done it in a widescreen format versus the normal 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper. It's a 4th level adventure designed for Shadow Dark. So these are pages that I wouldn't expect a game master to need. Obviously, you can do and use it however you like, but it was intended to be printed out and used at your table on physical paper. But this stuff provides the background and information, inspiration, so on and so forth. The overall penthouse can be a big, huge mansion on top of overlooking the city, or a drug den down in a slum or an alley, and maybe a former penthouse of the sorts. It could be filled with partiers. It could be empty and just let the random encounters crop up as they do. But your main focus is the master of the house, which is called out here. It can be male, female, incubus, succubus, or other. And there is some inspiration tables here to give them a little bit of a details. Roll as you see fit, 1, 2, use as many as you'd like. The overall scope of the adventure is that a trusted ally has fallen subject to the master. They have been lured in by their ways. Maybe they had some struggles in their private life that they have fallen victim to, and now the PCs must go into this penthouse and pull them out of this peril. I recommend rolling up an NPC however you see fit, page 124 of the Shadow Dark core rules, and then using a relationship table if need be. One PC, all the PCs, they share one. You decide how the PCs know the ally, but that is the driving impetus for going through this adventure. GMs will also tick on the agony track, which will determine the ally's transformation at the end. There are moments in which the agony is called out, and you'll tick on a simple chart, which we'll see in a second. And then we'll have a description news table as well too, which I'll talk more about. And the random encounters are called out in each of in some of the rooms as well. So if you are interested, let's get right into it. And as you can see, this is the page that I printed out. It has all the concise information here. I love to frame it. I love to have a reason for doing it. This was my first thing that I designed, and I've added things on as well, but I wanted to keep it as simple and concise as possible, inspired by the Shadow Dark way of doing things. You can see that the rooms are sort of numbered in a way that I would expect the players to encounter them. And if we were to go through, you have your ground floor in and out here. There's a Viperian here that maybe can be hostile or otherwise, but they kind of set the theme for someone to engage with. They're emaciated, they're down and out. Maybe they can recall the ally coming in or not. They solidify it, but it's sort of to frame the fact that not everything's coming at you with a blood-curdling scream, but that there are just creatures in here that are suffering in their own ways, and PCs can decide what to do. Coming through these doors may be locked, maybe not. They don't call it out specifically. It's up to you to decide. I sort of imagine kind of a free-flowing pen den that is frequented by all different walks of life. But you are spied upon in the adjacent rooms by werewolves and wererats, which are engaged in some sort of blood ritual as they wait for the crimson crescent moon. What that means, it's up for you to decide. Is it related to the adventure? Hasn't been called out specifically, but there are just other creatures doing things in here, and maybe they are lost in their own drug-addled visions or their own carnal desires or their own deep, dark rituals that have just taken place within this penthouse. But I did put in silvered implements here. It could be weapons, could be items, it could be, maybe some sort of components of some sort, just because a lot of the monsters in here are immune to normal damage. And they only take damage from silvered or magical weapons. So just to have a little bit of assurance that things don't go completely sideways for the PCs, put a little bit of silvered implements in here. But the doors don't open. The doors open to password. And password could be the literal word password. You can come up with your own password. just wanted to have it be known, kind of a little play there, be inspired in the moment. Perhaps you could utilize any of these things, the ally, the master, and the room itself. Use your own ongoing game, or just use what's printed here for a one-shot as need be. It's just the foundation for things. And then going into the main chamber, we encounter these curtains. These curtain symbols are called out in a number of different ways, and they sort of frame the notion that these things exist, and they're filled with random encounter 1, which is yellow haze, which is this ongoing, alluring, charming type of poison that the PCs can fall victim to. And I love this type of design where everything's called out right in the area that it's needed. I don't want to flip pages while I'm DMing. I don't want blocks of text to have room 1 and go find room 1 and this is room 8, go find. No, I want things, and especially if they're multiple use things, I want my attention to be drawn to them where and when I need them. So that was the intent for this one-page dungeon design. And to have the curtains up front here sets the scene that we're going to be dealing with these curtains that could be hazardous. And you can make that known up front, whether they have to do this DC 12 decks coming in, or if they decide to take these curtains down, maybe they're secret passageways. Well, it's designed to be that there's not, because they're going to encounter curtains later on, in which, lo and behold, there are. So by dealing with the yellow haze, maybe they just want to mosey by these stairwells up, and we'll encounter other curtains in the other area as well too. This is an instance in which the random encounters are called out specifically, and the Shadow Dark rules, these random encounters could make their way into the adventure randomly, obviously, but also called out specifically. It's sort of a way to save on the economy of generating these instances, while at the same time ensuring that these things have a potential of showing up. Sometimes you can go a whole adventure without rolling a random encounter. So nice to see them in action. And then to go through again, we have these monsters that are called out, these kludges, which, if we go to the next page real quick, we have our bestiary, which is includes all the monster statistics as a second page. You can have it behind your screen, all concise, ready to go, specifically for this adventure. You also have your round tracker here as well. You can denote if it's risky every other box. So as you're checking off rounds, know when to roll random encounters. You can put when spells end, or so on and so forth. So these specifically are the monsters that are called out just to have a little bit of a meat and substance to engage with, but they're the kludge creatures that are kind of clueless and helpless. And in fact, I think one of their elements are they're degenerate. And if these, the players get called out or call it out that, to subdue them, they back down pretty easily. If we're to go through here, the main chamber, we will also see instances of the master making its presence here. This is the first instance in which there's this overhang here where the master and ally overlook their whole party of degenerate folk or downtrodden people, and the master has taken this ally and trying to show them the ills of their ways. And this is one instance that seeded the agony track, which we see here. If the PCs don't make an effort to explore up or beyond the darkness or through the curtain, or however it may or may not be obscured, the ally will lose hope and we will tick on the agony track. And worst case scenario, there's 3 instances of the agony appearing in which they can max it out, and that will affect the final room in which the ally has lost all hope and will drink a transmogrifying potion and turn in 1d2 rounds. So that is in 1d2 rounds, they determine all hope is lost and drink the transmogrifying potion, however you want to play that. So this is the main chamber here, and if the PCs want to throw ropes and climb up or try to trace down the master because they did see them, well, there's some traps there to slow them down and drop them back to the ground for 3d6 points of damage, a 30-foot fall. But let's assume they ignore all of them and they're going through, and in the main chamber here, there's a mirror of fate. Again, another instance that is going to engage the agony track. The players could choose to fight their reflection. Maybe it's sort of like a double way mirror where it's transmitting back to the master and the ally, and the ally sees the heroes fighting for them, literally. So it actually decreases the agony track. It's the one instance in which the agony is altered positively in favor of the PCs. But if they're tempted to trade memories, for dark power, they'll gain advantage on 2d4 rolls. So that's a nice narrative moment your players could engage in And to gain these dark powers, what it might be, it's up to you. Maybe, just off the top of my head, maybe you could actually roll on the details table again to see how their powers manifest. But they gain advantage for the next 2d4 rolls. Doesn't help them beyond that, so they'll have to find another way to the masters. But if they choose to actually reveal their desires, it is transmitted to the master, and it unlocks the adjacent doors here. And random encounter 3 is called out, so this will happen specifically where the partiers come to you. And in all of these random encounters, except for the actual monster ones, the ability is save ends, so they'll be rolling a save every turn, but specifically, they all roll at disadvantage. So the yellow haze, you become charmed by the nearest non-ally, and by design purposes, that's so the allies don't become charmed by one another. They become charmed by the threat of the house itself, well, whether they're Klooges, Viperians, the master themselves. I can't wait to see what kind of stories unfold in that way. Again, you see your deepest, darkest desires and indulge wildly. You'll be lost in that transfixion, and you'll be rolling at save ends at disadvantage. Or the party comes to you, and there's a cascade of all these things, and you're consuming the weak-willed. They have to stand up to it, but again, they'll be within this influence, rolling at disadvantage until they pass the save, whether it's first, second, or last. And once you pass, you sort of move on as well too. So these curtains, going back to them, they hold secret stairwells up. Maybe there's partiers in here, maybe there's not called out specifically, up to you. But in each of the upper levels, there are partiers that are creating masks that possess those who wear them, and they're feeding nightmares to children. Good grief, that's very weird. But how you want to play that is up to you. And if they want to remove masks and save those that are feeding these nightmares to, bottling them up and sending them off to the kids, then they have to navigate with their dexterity. Otherwise, they're going to trigger being potentially charmed by these partiers. On the opposite stairwell, they're doing some sort of flesh grafting, flesh sculpting, and they could target the PCs unless they navigate carefully with their charisma. And if they don't, then they trigger number 2, where the creatures in there actually target them as the next form of flesh weaving that they'd like to do. If these doors are unlocked on the first floor again, you come up here in the main chamber here. These stairwells come up to the second floor, or these stairwells that we've just talked about, which are hidden behind curtains, have doors here that are locked in 2A and 2B. Again, these keys within their silvered implements could help them along their way should they find them. Otherwise, they're going to have to figure out another way of getting up there, whether it's finding keys, doing number 3 in the Mirror of Fate, or climbing up via the ropes somehow. Perhaps they notice it if worse comes to worse throughout the whole adventure. And then more klooges up here, just more meat in the way, perhaps finding their way or being a barrier to the final room here where the master indulges with the ally. And in this instance, there are several things in this room here. Skull airplanes, which could be, they're hanging in the air with burning oil, and that can be cut and used as bombers to deal 1d6 damage over 1d2 rounds. And that's drawing from the inspiration from the Weird Tale cover that I was assigned. Just these skull airplanes, I don't know, I imagine them as just, these weird candles hanging in the air that could be used. And this whole thing has been poisonous to the PCs. Well, let's turn it on the master themselves by combining a bunch of their poisons to make some sort of uber poison in which the master will becomes blighted. Is it 3 PCs each doing an action? Is it 1 PC doing an action, using their move to combine, and then another action and doing it themselves? It's left for you to decide, but I figured there would be a moment to engage with all of the poisons within the room. And once it is successfully applied or delivered to the master, all attacks and spells have advantage against the master for 1d4 plus 1 rounds. So this could be a great turn of events for potentially an otherwise overwhelming battle. As the master can charm these folks, these klooges could show up as well too. And then lastly, the agony track comes into effect here as the ally might lose all hope depending upon the nature of the whole adventure. And when they indulge, they will decide to lose all hope in X number of rounds, which will be determined by the agony track, turning into a white. Destroying the master just ends this agony completely. So best case scenario, they've completely navigated this whole adventure, -1 of the track, whatever it might be. and it is 0, and the ally has hope, does not turn at all, does not choose to drink the transmogrifying potion at all. So you can make that clear to your PCs that they were actually very successful in their endeavors of saving their trusted ally. So all of these things within the Penthouse, pretty labeled and straightforward. Somewhat of a small adventure for the night. I love one-page dungeons. I love adventures that can be done in one night. And these things, unless otherwise called out in a description, you have your description muse out here, in which you could use as inspiration, as a word bank to draw upon. You could go through and cross out the words and use in your own improv, use in your own description of things. Perhaps you throw things in an object or a detail, and it stimulates a PC's thought. I love these sorts of things that are disassociated from rooms. I just want it to set the tone and the vibe of the adventure without being tied directly to the room. So that's my own addition to these sorts of one-page dungeon designs. And similarly with the bestiary, I want all my monsters there. You have a little bit of scrap paper here to keep track of hit points or write in the margins. I love everything self-contained. And, of course, ending with the legal of the adventure, which is all in the digital PDF. But I highly encourage just printing out the physical 2 pages of the adventure and having it there for you to use in your game night. And you can get this PDF in the description below off of itch.io. There'll also be a description to the actual Shadow Dark Game Jam as well, too, in which voting opens at the end of the submission period, which is at the end of August, and I believe voting will be for the first month of September. So if you think Eternal Fate in the Penthouse is worthy of becoming judged by the judges, please go ahead and vote. I believe they take the top 5 submissions, and they'll review them in a live stream and maybe pick a winner. If there's enough demand otherwise, generally beyond the community vote, whether it's on Itch or in the Discord or in the interwebs or on this YouTube video, well, we here at Orange Eyes, we're thinking of doing a live play of this adventure, separate from our ongoing live Shadow Dark live play. So it would be somewhat related in world, but separate from the ongoing adventure. So if there's enough demand for that, let us know, and we'll get our folks around our table in person to play this adventure. And otherwise, we look forward to seeing what your Eternal Fate ends up being in this whole Shadow Dark game jam. So thanks for watching.